5 weeks after my last visit with my daughter Kim and my lover Mark, I was still euphoric from that encounter. Mark and I called each other every other day and had phone sex several times. Unfortunately, I couldn't visit our daughter during that time due to their busy studies, but we had already planned a longer weekend from Thursday through Sunday in the next 2-3 weeks on Monday. My daughter called and said that her next semester must be paid within the next week, or she would have to leave college. I said I would talk to her dad when my husband got home late that night. I asked him why our daughter's college money hadn't been paid yet. He looked me in the eye for a few seconds and told me that he would not pay for a disrespectful daughter who was stabbing him in the back. Stunned, I asked him what he meant. He simply said that he had learned that his daughter disrespected her father and perhaps even more disliked him. That's why he decided not to pay for her tuition. But I could pay for her from my account. Since it was late evening, I decided to call my daughter the next day, but when I tried to talk to my husband about it, he said he had said all that needed to be said. I went to bed angry with him. The next day I called my daughter and told her what her father had told me. She had no idea why her father thought she didn't love him anymore. She said she had always loved him, but I could hear the sadness in her voice. I told her I would take care of the money for school, but she should talk to her father. When I went online to our accounts, I found that most of the money in the accounts was gone. I couldn't find out where the money went. I started getting angry with my husband again and waited for him to come home as soon as he walked in. I asked him where all our money was and how I was supposed to pay for our daughter. Well, he said, I have withdrawn my money. The money that is in the joint accounts is for the current payments on the house and your car. If you don't have enough, get a job. As for paying for our daughter's schooling, maybe one of your lovers can pay for that, although I don't think your college lovers will have enough money. Maybe you can charge them for your fornication, or your regular lover will give you money. My legs gave out from shock and I had to sit up. What do you mean I don't have any lovers? I said as convincingly as I could. I felt like I was tearing myself apart and I didn't know what else to say. I didn't realize he knew about my extramarital sex at all. My husband was starting to get angry. Oh, come on, I know about your steady lover. I also know about your college lover, Mark. And I know about all the college boys you with the support of my ungrateful daughter. I also know that you and she shared her boyfriend. I cried because I saw my marriage fail. I'm sorry, it was just sex. I whispered between sobs. Just sex. Then tell me, when was the last time you had sex with me? And when did we make love? I couldn't truthfully answer that question, he continued. The last time you had sex with me was a week after your first visit to college, and it was just a pathetic sight as you lay there with your eyes closed and I did all the work. But during the third act, you screamed the name Mark. That's when I realized something was terribly wrong in our marriage, and as for making love, that was so long ago, even I don't remember. I realized you didn't have time or need for me between all that phone sex with Mark. Yes, I have it all on video and audio. Even your college threesome, I just sat there like a deer in headlights. I didn't realize that I had neglected my husband and my marriage for so long. I looked into his eyes and saw how hurt he was. What a terrible wife I had been. Not that I have any interest in having sex with you after your threesome. Who knows what diseases you have now? And our daughter even encouraged you to give about our marriage. She hasn't spoken to me once since she moved into the dorm. She even ignored my texts a few weeks ago. Now you know why I won't pay her tuition. She needs to get a job. Maybe she can prostitute herself like Mom. Maybe together you can earn enough to pay for college. He said it with pain and anger. I just sat there and cried. Now I'm going to get some sleep. Over the last couple days, I've moved most of my stuff into the guest room. I'm not surprised you haven't even noticed I will sleep there, as I see no need to pretend I sat there for a long time. Or at least it seemed like a long time to me. Then I called my daughter, even though it was late, but I needed someone to talk to, and I had to tell her about our problems without any greeting. I just cried on the phone. Kim, your father knows your dad knows about Mark, about all the sex that was there. He even knows about my lover here, and he knows about your involvement, which is why he won't pay your tuition. Oh, Mom, how does he know? Do you have a lover at home too? What about Mark? What's going to happen now, and who's going to pay for college? We hurt him. We've both hurt him very badly. And I don't know if our marriage will survive. He has said hurtful things about both of us, and honestly, I can't blame him. I don't know where he hid most of our money. But there is no way I can talk to him about it now. I have to let him cool down and stay obedient. Maybe I can save our marriage, but I wouldn't bet on it at this point. I'm not sure you should call him right now. He told me that you've been neglecting him since you moved into the dorm and even ignoring his messages, so please stay calm. Oh, and tell Mark not to call me. I can't see him or any of the other guys anymore, and I don't think your boyfriend Bob will ever be welcome here. My life is falling apart. There's no other word for it. I had it all, a loving husband who provided for both my daughter and me in every way. He made enough money that I didn't have to go back to work after our daughter Kim was born. We weren't rich, but we had a comfortable life with a nice home, and I didn't have to worry about money. Okay, sometimes I had to argue with my husband, but most of the time I got my way. We had a varied sex life, but it had dwindled in the last few years because my husband had gotten promoted several times and had to work late more often. Maybe that was the reason I was vulnerable to the advances of my longtime lover, Billy, with my high libido. I thought I could have a lover without hurting my husband. I thought I could have my cake and eat it and my husband wouldn't suffer for it. It would even improve my personal life with him. How silly that sounds now. Then came the time when our daughter moved away to college, and I visited her there for 2 weekends. The first weekend I met Mark at a fraternity party I attended with my daughter. I spent time in bed with him, and my daughter even appreciated it. What followed was 4 weeks of phone sex with Mark, and masturbating thinking about him during. This time I also met up with Billy, but I didn't tell him about Mark or my weekend. What I didn't realize was that I was completely neglecting my husband on my second visit to college. I met Mark again and had sex with him, and about a dozen of his friends throughout the weekend. My daughter knew everything and was happy for me, and we both didn't think much of my husband. Her father, we were infinitely selfish. Another 5 weeks after my second weekend away, my life fell apart. My husband stopped paying for college and told me he knew about my lover, but my downfall didn't end there. I spent the rest of the week in a fog. I called my daughter several times and we cried together. I can honestly say that I never wanted to hurt my husband. I just didn't think about what would happen if my husband found out today. I realized that I was living in my own fantasy world, where I could have everything. My daughter said she was coming home for the weekend and we should sit down and talk to him. I wasn't sure if it would help me, but maybe it could repair her relationship with her father. Mark called once after that, but I disconnected him. Even Billy, who I saw usually twice a week, didn't cross my mind. He texted me a few times asking to come over, but I told him once that I had issues to work out and I would get back to him later. My husband was not showing up at home in the evenings. At first I thought he was having sex with other women, but then I saw sports clothes in the hamper. I remembered that I had seen it before, but I didn't think about it then. Well, that shows where my mind was. Then the weekend came. Kim came over Friday afternoon and we talked. I even told her about Billy, the one secret I had kept from her when my husband arrived late that night. My daughter ran up to him, hugged him, and yelled several times, "I'm sorry." He just patted her on the back and said, "Weck talk in the morning," and went to the guest room. I know this indifference hurt her, but she said she understood. After a sleepless night, we met in the morning at our dining room table after looking at my daughter. And for a few seconds, he simply said, "Who wants to start talking? What do you both have to say about this mess?" My daughter and I had discussed this the night before, and thought it would be best if she mediated despite her role in this. Dad, first, I want to say that I'm sorry we hurt you so much. We both, Mom and I, truly love you, and that has never changed. We know that our actions show something different. My husband only grumbled but didn't say anything, so my daughter continued. You know that I was always my mother's best friend, not just a child. She shared a lot of her life with me, so I also know a lot about your marriage. Yes, we even talked about sex and your sex life. At these words, my husband looked at me surprised and angry. I couldn't look him in the eyes for long, so I lowered my gaze to my hands. I remembered what I had told my daughter over the past few years, and it didn't paint a good picture of my life with my husband, worse than it was. My daughter continued, "My mother told me that over the years your sex life suffered. You started working longer hours and were often tired. I know that she started using toys to fulfill her sexual needs because she didn't want to pressure you. I didn't know that she had an affair with Billy a few years ago. She told me last week that she started exploring her sexuality with him to improve your sex life together. Until then, she spoke in a normal voice but looked at me accusingly. But looking back, I never saw any improvement." At least not that she told me. She always told me that she was sexually unsatisfied and didn't get attention from you. That was the main reason I agreed to her affair with Mark on her first visit. I thought it would fulfill her needs in the long run and not hurt you in any way. I knew she'd been in contact with him over the following weeks. And I even knew she wanted to meet him again. However, I did not know how intense their calls and conversations were. I found out after talking to Mark. Yes, I talked her into meeting him again the second weekend she came to college. It wasn't meant to be a long-term affair. I knew she'd had sex with more than just Mark. Though I didn't know about the threesome the first night, but after that I just figured it wouldn't hurt anyone if she let her hair down all weekend. At those words, she lowered her eyes and blushed, but continued. Yeah, I let her my boyfriend Bob. Somehow it seemed normal for the bond between my mother and me. After she finished, we sat in silence and pondered what she had said. I began to cry and realized that it would take a miracle to save the marriage. After a long pause, my husband turned to me and coldly asked if I had anything to add. By way of explanation, I couldn't speak. So I just shook my head negatively. He waited a few more seconds to see if I would change my mind, then he leaned back and determined my future. Let's summarize. My wife had her long-term affair because I had to work long hours to feed my family. She wouldn't talk to me about it because she didn't want to hurt me. Instead, other men thinking it wouldn't hurt me, she wanted to explore her sexuality by having an affair with Mark instead of talking to me. She also became for over a dozen frat boys to fulfill her sexual needs with the support of my daughter. She even slept with her daughter's boyfriend to get closer to her when he put it like that. It sounded really awful. I shamefully leaned back in my chair and let the tears flow, but I didn't think for a second that they would have any effect on him. After a while, he spoke again, addressing his daughter. Let's get something straight. Your mother had a good job before she got pregnant with you. Don't get me wrong. The pregnancy was planned, and I always wanted children. That's the reason we moved to this bigger house for all the kids we planned, even when I argued that this house was too big. But she counted that she would go back to work after the planned children went to school and contribute to the household. I sat there in tears and remembered that time, a time when we were happy. It's true, I wanted that big house and to fill it with kids, and I really wanted to go back to work after you were born. She stayed home and took care of you. After a few years, I wanted more children, but your mother decided that one was enough and that she didn't want any more. I never forced her to have more because I thought it was her decision in the end when you went to school. She also decided that she didn't want to go back to work and would focus on you growing up. It was okay at first because I was making enough to live a good life. There was just a little problem now. We had a big house that I had to pay for, and your mother didn't go back to work in itself. That wouldn't have been such a problem because I was doing well at my job and making good money. However, since your mother stayed home, she had to fill her free time, especially after you went to school. Oh boy, I knew where this was going. I never realized how bad it was. Her hobbies eventually cost a lot of money. I don't want to explain what your mother spent our money on. I don't want to repeat her bi-weekly visits to the beauty parlor for a few $100s or her shoes, purses, and dresses that she used maybe once over the years. And I don't want to mention her new car that she had to replace every 3 or 4 years with all the extras. Of course, she even spent some of the money I earned on her lover while I got for Christmas a gift certificate. Her lover got an expensive watch with personalized engraving. At these words, my daughter looked at me in surprise. This was also something I hadn't told her about. It made me feel even more embarrassed. You may wonder why I didn't say anything. In fact, I had said something from the beginning. I had several conversations about money with your mother, but I kept them away from you. She always promised to cut back on her spending. Well, that would last a few weeks, and then she would start spending again. After a few years, I stopped discussing it. But I had to work longer hours to finance your mother, and of course I don't need to tell you what hobbies you've tried over the years, and I'm sure you have no idea how much they cost. Your mother always wanted the best of the best for you. Over the past few years, 70% of our money went to you and your mother. With the remaining 30%, I paid my expenses and maintained our nest. Your mother once accused me of spending $1,150 on a tennis racket while she spent $1,400 on a new bag in the same week. And I'd really like to see your mom and all the lingerie she bought from Victoria's Secret or Agent Provocateur. But I guess that's reserved for lovers. My God, I thought how much he knows. I've never seen it this bad. I never knew our financial situation. The money was just there to be spent when I bought sexy lingerie. I seemed to think of my husband, but I never wore it for him even when he asked me to. He interrupted my train of thought by continuing, "So my dear daughter, you will realize that money doesn't grow on trees. I had to work for it, and I had to work long hours to bring in extra money. I like my job, so it wasn't a big problem for me. Me, of course, my working long hours had to affect our sex life. After working 10 or more hours a day, I don't have the energy to fondle your mom for a long time before getting down to the main part. She has always needed me to seduce her with caresses and fondle her body for long periods of time. Don't get me wrong, I love foreplay, but I don't always have the energy for it, hearing about our sex life." My daughter started to blush. She wasn't ready to talk about sex with her father, even though she had started it herself. "Oh, come on, my dear daughter. There's no reason to blush if you talk to your mother about our sex life. You must have known all this. Did your mother tell you that at the beginning of our marriage, we had quite an active sex life? We did it often and sometimes several times a day. That, of course, diminished after you were born, which was fine with me, but what your mother was never, at least with me, was really adventurous. Introducing new ideas wasn't really appreciated, so I stopped trying 10 years ago, and plain vanilla sex has diminished altogether. Hearing it from him in that way, I wanted to object, but I couldn't. Everything he said was true. He tried to be more adventurous and try new things, but I refused. I didn't want to be thought of as a prostitute. What a joke that is now, how my lover or the frat boys saw me. I didn't care. So I was willing to do things I wouldn't do with my husband. So my dear daughter blaming me for our poor sex life and using that as an excuse is not working. Did your mom ever tell me anything? No. Did she ever introduce new sexual practices? No. Did she ever agree to new things introduced by me? Almost never. About 90% of our intercourse was with me as an active partner, with your mother lying on her back. So don't tell me it's my fault she's a to others." The last tirades got louder and louder, and I leaned back more and more. He took a few deep breaths and continued more calmly. "I don't know what you both expect from me, but there will be changes in all of our lives. You can think about your future until tomorrow. Then I will decide what happens next," with these words. He looked at us for a few seconds that seemed like hours. Then he got up and left the room. Half an hour later, he came downstairs with a small gym bag and said he would be back late in the evening, and we didn't need to wait for him with dinner. Kim and I sat at the table looking at each other, but immersed in our own thoughts. I had always considered myself a person of high morals and a high sense of family, but coming face to face with the truth, I suddenly saw myself for who I really was, a selfish, cheating. Self-awareness is the first step to self-improvement, but damn, it hurt. But what hurt the most was that I had hurt my husband. Somehow I didn't feel sorry for myself, not one bit. But I did feel sorry for my husband and my daughter. How? And especially when had I lost my morals? That was something I had to decide for myself, whether my marriage would last or not. I don't want to go into details. But as I talked to my daughter the rest of the day, I knew our relationship had gone badly awry. She didn't openly blame me, but I could tell from her wording and tone that she was blaming me for presenting her father as a bad person. She wanted a relationship with her father, and I thought she had a great chance I would help her in any way I could. However, I didn't know if my marriage was mortally wounded or if it could be saved. I knew it would never be the same again, and I had to make many concessions. I knew I loved my husband even though my actions didn't show it, and I knew I respected my heartfelt husband for all he had done for us. I never let anyone seriously berate him. I have to take the blame, take responsibility for my actions, and start giving without expecting anything. The next Sunday morning began the same way it had the day before. My daughter and I were sitting at the table when my husband arrived before either of them could speak. I said, "Please let me begin before I lose my courage." They both looked at me in surprise, and when they didn't object, I continued, "My dear husband, I am sorry that I have caused you such pain. I don't know when I lost my way, but please believe me when I say that I have always loved you. Be assured that nothing you did or didn't do was the cause. The blame lies entirely on me. I don't know why I acted the way I did, but I intend to find out with professional help. I know you're not happy with our daughter right now, but please understand she is as much victim as you are, a victim of my selfishness and the lies I've told her, and lies in the form of my omission of important facts." With the last sentences, they looked at me with big eyes. I don't think they were even expecting something like this. Before losing my composure, I continued, "Even if you don't want to see me anymore, please make peace with our daughter. She needs you as a responsible father to get her back on the right track. She needs you a lot more than she needs me. At least right now I know I have no right to ask. But if you find it in your heart to give me a second chance, I'll do anything to earn it. I know you'll never forget what I did, but I hope you can forgive me sometime in the future if you go on without me to be happy with someone else. You forgive me at least so that you can be happy with that last sentence. I lost my composure and ran upstairs to my bedroom. I wasn't going to say that last phrase because I didn't want to think about life without him. But right at that moment, all I wanted was for him to be happy with whoever he was with. It took me 15 minutes to calm down, and I went downstairs. "I'm sorry," I said as I sat down again. Everyone seemed to be deep in their own thoughts, but then my husband straightened up. "I thank you for your confession. I didn't expect it to be so serious." After a few seconds, he continued, "I don't want to beat around the bush. I've already consulted with a divorce attorney with that revelation." I leaned back in my chair. I knew my marriage had broken up, and all I had to do was wait to be served. I knew I wouldn't resist. I almost missed what he said next. Unfortunately, the laws in this state are not really in my favor in a divorce case. After considering all the possibilities with an attorney, we've come to the conclusion that it's cheaper to keep you here. I looked up with surprise and hope on my face. He looked me in the eye, but there was certainly resentment in his eyes. But this was the first time I had a faint hope of saving my marriage, but I knew it was going to be a long road, and I was willing to take it. Of course, there will be some major changes first. I've canceled all of your credit cards. You will both get debit cards that I will put a small but appropriate amount of money on each week. You should use this money to pay for groceries and some personal expenses. I know you need to make some serious adjustments to your spending, but this time it will be up to me. Financial hardship didn't scare me as much. Even though I knew I would have to adjust, I was used to having money when I wanted it. I'll have to get used to it. But the most important thing is your infidelity. You know you hurt me with your cheating. And even though you told me you never lost respect for me, I feel insulted. I hope you don't expect physical affection in the foreseeable future because at the moment touching you doesn't appeal to me. This hurt me very deeply. It was like a slap in the face. I had always wanted to look good, and it was important to me to know that men desired me. But now the man I truly loved didn't desire me, didn't even want to touch me. And it shocked me, but when I felt my face turn pale, I realized that it wasn't my body itself that made me unattractive. It was what I had done with my body. I had allowed other men to use it, even though only my husband should be allowed to use it. At this point, I felt dirty myself. Not only my body, my soul felt dirty too. I knew I had to cleanse my body and soul of deceit and selfishness. One more note. I expect you to get a clean bill of health. I know you've had unprotected sex with guys, and I don't want to take any chances at those words. My face flushed red with shame for all my lust. I didn't think about my health, much less the health of my loved ones. I would kill myself if I passed on a few STDs to my husband. This may be the hardest part for you, but I don't want to abstain from sex. We've had less in recent years, and then just boring sex. We've already talked about the reasons why. However, you had a lot of adventurous sex with your lover, so now I have a hall pass for the future. I won't just sleep with any woman, but if I find someone worthwhile, I will have sex with her without regret. I won't flaunt it in front of you, and it won't be someone in our circle of friends, preferably some stranger. I'll keep it a secret, but I'll tell you. If you want to know, oh my God, he intends to cheat. Several feelings came over me: anger, pain, hatred, humiliation. With that last feeling, I suddenly realized how he felt when he found out about my deception. It didn't make me feel any better, but I knew I had no right to complain. I just leaned back. Of course, if you want to continue this marriage, you must remain faithful. Otherwise, I'll divorce you. I can't take any more disrespect. Maybe I should have sex with your lover's girlfriends. But as far as I know, only 3 of them have steady girlfriends. He looked at Kim again. Bob has a girlfriend, but I'm not sure I want to have sex with my own daughter. Kim looked at him wide-eyed. And your longtime lover, Billy? Well, he doesn't have a steady girlfriend, but he has 2 other married women he sees regularly. You're not his only woman. He's a player who likes to have married women and put horns on their husbands. There is at least one marriage that fell apart because of him. About 2 years ago, this was something new. I didn't think much of Billy, or what he did when I wasn't with him. There was no love on my part, only carnal lust. Those are the rules for the future if you can't live with them. You'll have to file for divorce yourself. With these words, he stood up and left us sitting. A long silence followed as we pondered what we were facing. The only problem for me was the realization that my husband might be cheating on me. But what choice did I really have? I could be well compensated in the divorce. But at what cost? I love my husband, and I didn't want to lose him. I knew I had to make myself desirable to him body, and even more so soul. I had to win him back. The rest of Sunday, we hardly spoke at all. Kim left for her college on Sunday night. I didn't. And know what surprises the next few days would hold for me. On Monday night, an excited Kim called. She told me that Mark's fraternity had thrown a party that weekend. One of the girls there, who had been drinking heavily, had been raped by several guys. She reported the rape that same day. Someone called the police and reported a major drug distribution at that particular fraternity. A drug raid on the fraternity building found many drugs of all kinds, date rape drugs, and videos of various groups on the fraternity brothers' computers and cell phones. It was Mark's fraternity, and according to Kim, a lot of drugs were found in his room as well. I looked at my husband and saw the corners of his mouth lift up. I had a feeling that he knew about all of this before, maybe had set it all up. When I asked him, he simply told me that there was no way he would have organized the rape of an innocent girl. It was just a coincidence, and icing on the cake, the college has shut down this fraternity and its members will face hard times. Their future careers are not looking so good on Thursday. I received another unexpected call. They had found child porn on Billy's office computer, and further investigation revealed several videos of him with various married women. There were none of my videos, but since I was one of his frequent contacts, I was interviewed. My husband supported me during the investigation, and after a few days I was acquitted. A few weeks later, Billy called me from detention. He asked me if my husband had planted the child porn since all my videos were missing. I didn't even know they existed. He had gotten an anonymous letter that said, "Don't have married women." I didn't ask, but I knew my husband had a hand in it. I know he has a friend who is great at it. Security. I just hoped this friend hadn't seen my videos, since I knew he was getting revenge on my lovers. I was just waiting for the axe to fall on me. Epilogue a year later. I am happy. I'm still married to my husband, and I love him more than ever. Of course, it's been a rough year. I immediately went to a counselor to understand myself, a full medical exam. Yes, I also got a clean bill of health. Revealed a hormonal imbalance that may have started a long time ago, apparently shortly after my pregnancy, and I began treatment psychologically. I was diagnosed with a mild form of shopping addiction. These things combined with a high libido and less time with my husband may have led to my cheating. I could cite this as an excuse, but deep down, I knew that I was the one making the cheating decisions. I made sure my husband knew all of this, but I never presented it as an excuse, and I made sure my husband knew it too. A few weeks later, I found a job in my profession at a small startup. My boss is a woman. I don't want any misunderstandings with my husband, who was cheated on by her husband. I told her all about myself, and at first she was very strict with me, but she saw how I wanted to be a better woman, so gradually we became good friends. The work doesn't pay that much money, but it is satisfying. My husband told me that I can keep the money, but I contribute it to his account. I live on his debit, which he has increased over the last year, but I have never used it fully except when I bought him something as a gift. My daughter has rebuilt her relationship with her father, and they are closer than ever. All I want is for them to be happy. My own relationship with my husband took longer to get better. After just a few weeks, a friend mentioned that my husband had become a real stud. He cut back on his work hours and started a fitness program. Within a few months, he became very fit. Over the summer, our daughter was visited by several of her college friends. They seemed to flirt with him more than necessary, and he enjoyed their attention. Was I really jealous? Of course, but surprisingly more than that, I was proud that he was attractive to young women. Did he sleep with any of them? I don't know and don't want to know. After all, he had a hall pass. It was 3 months before he came back to our bedroom, and another 3 months before we started having sex again. It was when I caught him off guard in the bathroom that he fought back. I wasn't angry, but I was horny. I told him that he didn't need to fight himself off. He can use my body any way he wants. That was the first night of intimacy. With that, we became real husband and wife again. Our daughter felt it immediately when she visited us and was happy for us. A year later, we went out to dinner as a couple. After dinner, he told me he was canceling his own hall pass. If I wanted to know anything about what happened during that time, I had one last chance to ask. And he would answer, after this evening, he will never say anything more about it. I thought about it for a minute, and then just said, I don't want to know anything about the past, but I ask that in the future everything that happens between us. Martha and I like to linger in bed for a few minutes each morning after the alarm clock rings. After all these years, we knew what was best for us. Those warm, lazy extra minutes in bed must be paid for with a desperate struggle to get ready for work a few years ago. The payback also included a mad dash to get the kids ready for school. Now that our 2 kids are gone, we find ourselves lingering in bed more and more often before the mad morning rush, the one that precedes the drive to work to make matters worse. I had to leave the house a good 20 minutes earlier than usual. Martha had to work late tonight, so instead of taking my car, we work not far from each other. So we commute to work together. I decided to ride my mountain bike to work. The weather forecast was also predicting a gorgeous spring day. I took the last bite of my toast, washed it down with coffee, and was ready to go. "I'm on my way, honey." I called out toward the bathroom where Martha was still busy. I waited for her to poke her head out the door and speak to me, but I didn't hear a response. "I'll see you tonight. I love you," I added after a few seconds. I was running late. I didn't have time to ponder the lack of response from Martha. I threw my keys in my backpack and walked out. I'm Frank McKay, 53-year-old office manager for the State Department of Public Works. My wife, Martha, 49, works as an administrative assistant in the main office of a manufacturing company. We both look better than average, but Martha is dazzling, if I may say so. She doesn't look her age. Many men look in her direction. When we go out 10 minutes later, I heard a whistle announcing that I had received a text message. A few seconds later, my cell phone rang. It's hard enough to keep track of all the cars while biking, and I didn't talk on the phone. While on the road, I answered my phone at work. I got to work on time, but was so busy getting properly dressed for an 8:45 meeting that I left my cell phone in my backpack, forgetting about all the phone calls. Later, I followed a group of coworkers for lunch. Finally, during my afternoon coffee break, I remembered the phone calls. I had 5 messages from Martha, 2 text messages, and 3 voice messages. The first text message was sent at 8:10 and read, "You have the wrong keys, call me." The second text message was sent at 8:35, "I'm waiting for your call." I then listened to the voicemail. The first message was left at 8:11. "Hi, honey, you took the wrong set of keys when you left. Could you drop them off at my work this morning? I'm going to need them, call me." Her voice was a little harsh, and I didn't understand why she doesn't need the keys at work. They use a state-of-the-art security system with a key card. The second voicemail was left around 10:15. "What are you doing, Dave? I've been waiting for the keys all morning, call me. I have better things to do than wait for you." I've known Martha for over 25 years, 23 years as a wife. It was obvious to me that she was royally pissed off. Anger and contempt oozed from every word before listening to her last voicemail message. I pulled my keys out of my backpack and placed them on the table. I listened to the last message left at 12:55. "Where are you? I'm still waiting for my keys. I don't know what you were thinking this morning, but they better be on my desk this afternoon this time." Martha didn't hold back her anger. She was almost shouting. I was stunned. Lately, I had begun to get used to Martha getting angry at me over nothing as she approached 50. I thought that perhaps she was going through changes in her body that were causing her to act strangely. This was the explanation she gave me when I pointed out her change in behavior. She rebuked me when I asked her to see a doctor for hormone treatment or whatever it is they do with menopause. Life with Martha had gotten very difficult lately. Our relationship was strained, but it was strange to see such an outburst over a bunch of keys she didn't need. I've been working on myself. I think 2 can play the anger game. I decided not to call her and just wait until 5 o'clock to take the damn keys shortly after 5. I made it to Martha's workplace. Surprise, surprise, I was just in time to see her pull out of the parking lot and head home. Despite the heavy traffic and the abilities of my bike, I still couldn't catch up with her. There was no use in doing so anyway, as we were both heading home. I knew she would soon pull out of the heavy traffic and pick up a speed I couldn't match. So I decided to take my usual, more direct route to try and overtake her home. A few minutes later, I was caught off guard when I saw her car heading to another part of town. It was an easier route for me. I could cut through the park, but definitely not the best route for Martha. She turned onto a street lined with many 2-story duplexes and parked at the curb. I had my suspicions, so I slowed down, watching her from afar as she climbed the stairs and rang the doorbell, typing on her phone. Even from where I was standing in front of my bike, I heard her text ring out. She read the message, walked back to her car, and drove off. What the hell happened? I asked myself. Martha, who was supposed to be working late, had arrived at an unknown apartment. I grabbed the bunch of keys I was holding to get a closer look. I recognized her car keys and our house keys. However, there was another key that I didn't recognize. I had a feeling it was the key that Martha was sorely missing. I walked over to the duplex, climbed the stairs, inserted the key into the front door lock, and turned it. The click of the lock signaled the end of my marriage to Martha. I didn't open the door. I needed to think, what was I going to do? My growing anger made it tempting to enter my wife's lover's apartment, destroying his belongings. Or I could wait for him and beat the crap out of him, or I could just go to the police station and go straight to jail. No, blind anger wasn't the right answer, but I had to do something. I looked into the apartment. Technically, I was committing trespassing, but if I hurried, I wouldn't get caught. The first thing I saw was neatly folded mail on a small table in the hallway. I grabbed the phone bill. The letter was addressed to Steve Muller. I had no idea who it was, but the phone bill could come in handy. I put it in my backpack. There was enough information for the moment. I didn't want to get caught spying in someone else's apartment, so I got the hell out of there instead of heading home. I drove to a nearby hardware store within minutes. I had a duplicate key. I expected Martha to be home. But her car wasn't in the driveway. I didn't know what her lover had texted her, but it had to be a message to meet him somewhere else. I decided to play with Martha for a while. I called her, but she didn't answer. I didn't leave a text message, but I sent her a voicemail. I'm running late too, but I'll bring my keys soon. I'll be in your office soon. It took a few seconds to get a response that won't be necessary. I've made other arrangements. I just left my office. Just go home. Followed her immediate reply. In her head, she probably added, and leave me alone, dumbass. I had a shitty evening. Martha didn't get home until 10 o'clock. That gave me a good 4 hours to decide what to do first. I wanted proof of her cheating with the copy I now had on my keychain. It would be easy to just do what I needed to do. The phone bill was pointing to her lover all by itself. They were constantly on the phone and texting each other, even in the evenings when Martha and I were together all this time. I thought she was texting our children. Did I really need to know why she had decided to leave me? No. It didn't matter now. Our love had faded. In the last 6 months, it can only take so much indifference, recriminations, and nagging before a man's love begins to fade. I now realized that my loving wife was distancing herself from our marriage, but I never knew it. Today's discovery was the final blow to a very shitty marriage. We're done. There is no benefit to proving adultery in our state. Irreconcilable differences would be a motive, and the judge would split our assets 50-50. But as a cheating husband, I felt I had a lot to gain back some of my pride. I will not allow Martha to lie while married. The reason would be publicized to our children, parents, and friends, knowing how Martha has changed over the past few months. I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to make me out to be the bad guy. In some way, I did play with many revenge scenarios, but decided not to go down that path. I only had a few years before early retirement, and I didn't want to ruin that. Retirement wouldn't be what I had envisioned all those years ago when I was living with Martha. But it was better than going to jail and losing my job now. At least I would enjoy my retirement the way I wanted to, not the way Martha wanted me to. I decided to face Martha's irrit when she returned from her date, so that would work in my favor. Her anger might lead to a small argument and excuse my icy behavior over the next few days. However, sex with Steve must have calmed her down a bit. Now that I was very attentive, I realized that she had averted my eyes a little when Martha finally got home. She was surprised to see me still sitting in the living room. She threw the spare car key into the container we keep by the door and grabbed her own bunch of keys that I had put there earlier. Taking one look at the keys, she tossed them into her purse. I expected some sort of grunt, but she didn't utter a single word. She headed straight for the bathroom. I'm tired, she said to someone in the hallway. I'm going to take a shower and go straight to bed. What I asked, no love. Tonight, her only response was to close the bathroom door behind her and lock it. Do you know many married people who lock the bathroom door? I hadn't noticed it before, but it happened a lot when Martha came home from working late. My God, I was so stupid. No wonder she was leaving me before going to bed. I watched the evening show. I hoped Martha was sound asleep. I swear she was still awake. Sleep was eluding her as well the next morning. Under the pretense of a meeting I left early in my car instead of work, I went to an electronics store and bought some interesting things. It only took me a couple hours to get Muller's apartment wired for sound and picture. Being in the apartment for so long, I had time to look around. It was very well furnished. Many of the items looked like antiques. I don't know if he had a maid, but his apartment was spotless, not a speck of dust to be seen anywhere. I wonder if he was a stickler for cleanliness. It was food for thought. I hoped my little spy gear would go unnoticed for a few days, at least long enough to get some racy shots of my wife and her lover. I shouldn't have worried about that. Back at the office after lunch, I received another text from Martha asking me not to wait up for her, as she had another late meeting. I made an appointment with the lawyer for the next day. That evening, I drove by Mueller's apartment and saw Martha's car. Despite everything I had been through in the last 24 hours, I could still feel my heart sinking at yet another proof of her betrayal. Tomorrow would be a crucial day. I drove back to the house. I was tempted to just check into the town motel, but it would be ridiculous to go to that expense when it wasn't my fault. Back at the house, I considered sleeping in the guest bedroom. But again, I decided that I wasn't the one who'd ruined our marriage. Let Martha sleep there. I moved all of her things into the guest bedroom in a mess. I just grabbed entire drawers, piled them on the bed, and then pulled clothes off her side of the closet and threw them in there as well. Generally a very soothing activity. I felt better with each armful I carried to her room. When she got home that evening, she looked worse than she had the night before. She had that just look she might have after a 5-hour again. She was surprised to see me. She didn't bother to explain her lateness or her appearance, as if she could explain the reason. I couldn't believe I could cause such pain, knowing we had a divorce looming over us. I grabbed her hand and dragged her toward the bedrooms. "What are you doing, Frank? You're hurting me," she whimpered. I forced myself to speak more confidently than I felt. I knew I was minutes away from losing her. I had to act fast. I had to keep my cool. "Shut up," I said loudly. It was so out of character for me saying things like that, as if I'd hit her suddenly. The accusing looks I'd been getting for the past few months were replaced with fear. But what kind of fear? Fear of violence or fear of exposure? I couldn't know that, and I wasn't going to ask. I opened the guest bedroom so she could see her things stacked there, starting tonight. I said sharply, "This is your room," and I pushed her inside. "We're not husband and wife anymore. Stay away from me." I warned her, in fact, it would be better if you just packed up and left right now. Martha was annoyed and angry. She resisted trying to leave the room. "Oh no, you bastard. If any of us are sleeping in the guest room, it's you," she said. "I broke my back taking care of the kids. You in the house, show some respect or leave the house." Did I want to argue with her? No. I forcefully pushed her back into the guest room, surprising us both with the force of my action. "I'm giving you two choices." I growled at her. "Either you sleep here until our divorce is final, or you go live with Steve Miller." Right now, his name struck her like a karate kick. Despite her behavior in recent months, Martha still knew me better than anyone. She realized I knew about her cheating, and she knew I had no forgiveness. She knew I would never accept her back into my life, and we would never part as friends. Who wants to be friends with someone who stabbed you in the back? Could see in her eyes that she didn't envision getting caught, and she wasn't ready for a confrontation. After a few seconds, I saw defeat written all over her face. She staggered into the bedroom, threw off her clothes, and sat on the bed. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. She said something I couldn't hear. What I shouted. "I'm sorry," she said, a little louder. "I was so stupid. Please don't hate me. You know me, Martha. I said I won't hate you after a while, but I'm sure I won't love you either. Hell, I don't know if I can just be around you." I started to close the door, but I wanted to hurt her some more. "I'd rather make this quick," I said firmly. "I'd appreciate it if you left as soon as possible. Just sign the divorce papers you'll be getting soon, and we'll never have to see each other again." I closed the door, speaking to Martha one last time before the court hearing. The last sound I heard was her sobbing. The next day, I picked up my spy gear from Muller's apartment. My next stop was my attorney. Since my demands were simple, he assured me that the divorce papers could be delivered within 2 days. I paid him in advance and left. I tried to go back to work, but it was more than futile. I finally explained my predicament to my supervisor, who told me to take a few days off. I drove home. But when I arrived, I saw Martha in the process of moving and parked further down the street from the video I watched. I recognized Steve Muller helping her. I had the urge to beat him up, but the extra 3 in and 40 pounds he had against me made that more desirable than possible. I left later that night. I felt the real impact of Martha's betrayal for the first time. My anger vanished, replaced by a loneliness like I had never experienced. The divorce would have been more traumatic if our children still lived with us. What was a blessing was also a curse, as I had no one to turn to for comfort. My parents were deceased. My brother and sister lived on the other side of the country. I decided to reach out to my two daughters. I was surprised to learn that Martha had not yet contacted them. She called and texted them all the time in college. I guess it was easier for her to lie to me than to her children. A few weeks ago, if someone had asked me the proper behavior toward a cheating spouse, I would have advocated discretion, keeping the peace, and respecting 23 years of devotion as a mother and wife, now suffering desperate for love or at least sympathy. I told my two daughters, Mandy and Tess, all about it. I felt good knowing that neither of them doubted me when I told them that their mother had cheated on me, left me for another man. For a moment, I thought they might have known about their mother, but they were very upset by the news, and I dismissed the thought. My barely restrained sobs also helped to convince them their understanding was a great comfort to me. I made a big mistake that day. By the time I finished calling the kids, I had already had one full bottle of wine. I'm not a big drinker. Drinker Martha and I might have 1 or 2 bottles of wine a week, or sometimes 6 beers. The mistake wasn't the drinking. It was alcohol-induced self-pity faced with failure. A man must take responsibility for that failure, but try as I might, I couldn't understand what I had done to push Martha away. My job had never been an obstacle to my family life. I didn't have to travel maybe once every 5 years. For retraining, my overtime was limited to a few fixed periods a year. To be honest, I've probably let myself go a bit in the last few years since I turned 50. But I was by no means fat or out of shape. Muller didn't seem much younger or in better shape than I was. I wondered if he was a better lover, an area in which my knowledge was rather meager. I hadn't had much experience before I met Martha, just 4 girlfriends between the ages of 18 and 28, and Martha and I had a lot to learn together after we met. I don't think Martha left me for social status either. His apartment didn't seem outlandish. His pieces of furniture showed more than anything else, but he wasn't a father. We were probably in the same income bracket. As I curled up in the fetal position for the night, it occurred to me that there was no good reason why she left, only that I was who I was. Can you struggle with being yourself? Can I stop existing so that everything can be okay? My call the next morning came around 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. "You son of a," Martha yelled. "You shouldn't have been so rude to Mandy and Tess." For a second, I wanted to just hang up, but part of me wanted the confrontation to put this whole nightmare behind me. "What's rude, sweetie?" I asked. "The way you cheat on me for months, or the way you move in with your lover, or is it all of the above?" There was only silence. I hate silence. "Martha, some part of me still loves you," I said. "I won't say whether it is my female part or my male part, perhaps my stupid part. But there's one thing I'll never do: lie to our family." "You wouldn't dare," she pleaded. "Not." "Daddy, please watch me," I said, and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial button for Martha's father, but I didn't press it. Harvey had been miserable since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a very good man, but in his 80s, his health was a bit fragile. I think his will to live was a little weak. I could certainly understand that today, and he was a good man. I might as well have let him die peacefully instead of ruining his life because of his daughter's behavior. My anger was receding. I decided to inform Martha of my decision. I picked up Muller's cell phone bill and dialed the number listed on it. A male voice answered. I hesitated for a second. "Martha McKay, please?" I asked. There was silence for a moment. I could hear someone crying in the background. Obviously Martha, who's asking Miller, asked her father, "You piece of..." I lied, unable to hold back a wave of indignation. "Oh, and forget about talking to her. Just tell my daughter not to call me. Forget I exist and leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone." By less than a minute later, feeling a little remorseful, I dialed Martha's cell phone number. She answered almost immediately, but didn't say anything. She was still hiccuping with tears. "Hello, Martha?" I broke the silence. "Did you have a good day, Frank?" Why, she asked, "Why did you tell my father it would destroy him? Heck, been in such poor health lately. You knew that. Hey, don't shift the blame." I said, as such an insult was hard to utter. "It wasn't your father who was on the phone with your lover. It was me. I love your father, and I know you would have killed him with your cheating. I want to emphasize something. Here, are you listening to me?" "Yes," She said, I'm listening. Don't ever let this guy come between me and my girls, or your father will know everything about you, all the raw details, as you rightly put it. I told her, don't think I'm kidding. I've trusted you for most of my adult life. I didn't. No, it was possible, but you broke that trust. I'm repeating myself, but I have to fight myself not to just shoot you on sight. I have a lot of hate in my heart for you, and that's what defines me at this moment. Do you get it? Yes, she finally said between sobs. Mark, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, I never wanted this. Neither did I said, and hung up 6 months later. I received the official papers that defined the official end of my marriage. I had recovered from my bout of depression, but there was still something missing in my life. I couldn't figure out what it was. I dated a few women, but I didn't get very far. I guess they recognized that I had a lot of baggage. I had a one-night stand with a work acquaintance divorced like me. Sex seemed empty without love and affection. We were just two adults desperate for relief. But it left me with a sense of loneliness worse than before coming home from work one evening. An epiphany finally came over me after moving into my new apartment. We'd sold the house to split the proceeds. I said hello to a new friend who had shown up 2 weeks ago. Hi, Jack, I said, peeking out the door. I was going back to the days when I was a bachelor giving names to the dusty clumps. Gathering everywhere in my house, mostly behind doors and under the bed, Jack stood by the front door while Roger and Bugs lived under the bed. I was almost ready to pick up the vacuum cleaner in the closet, embarrassed by the thought that Muller would never leave his apartment in such a state as I curled up in the fetal position for the night. It occurred to me that there was no good reason why she left, only that I was who I was. Can you struggle with being yourself? Can I stop existing so that everything can be okay? My call the next morning came around 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone without looking at the caller ID. You son of a... Martha yelled, you shouldn't have been so rude to Mandy and Tess for a second. I wanted to just hang up, but part of me wanted the confrontation to put this whole nightmare behind me. What's rude, sweetie? I asked. The way you cheat on me for months, or the way you move in with your lover, or is it all of the above? There was only silence. I hate silence, Martha. Some part of me still loves you. I said I won't say whether it is my female part or my male part, perhaps my stupid part, but there's one thing I'll never do, lie to our family. You wouldn't dare, she pleaded not. Daddy, please watch me, I said, and hung up. My finger hovered over the speed dial button for Martha's father, but I didn't press it. Harvey had been miserable since his wife died of breast cancer 2 years ago. He was a very good man, but in his 80s, his health was a bit fragile. I think his will to live was a little weak. I could certainly understand that today, and he was a good man. I might as well have let him die peacefully instead of ruining his life because of his daughter's behavior. My anger was reading. I decided to inform Martha of my decision. I picked up Muller's cell phone bill and dialed the number listed on it. A male voice answered. I hesitated for a second. Martha McKay, please, I asked. There was silence for a moment. I could hear someone crying in the background. Obviously, Martha, who's asking Meller, asked her father, you piece of... I lied, unable to hold back a wave of indignation. Oh, and forget about talking to her. Just tell my daughter not to call me, forget I exist, and leave my grandchildren, my son-in-law, and me alone. By less than a minute later, feeling a little remorseful, I dialed Martha's cell phone number. She answered almost immediately, but didn't say anything. She was still hiccuping with tears. Hello, Martha, I broke the silence. Did you have a good day, Frank? Why, she asked. Why did you tell my father it would destroy him? Heck, been in such poor health lately, you knew that. Hey, don't shift the blame, I said, as such an insult was hard to utter. It wasn't your father who was on the phone with your lover. It was me. I love your father, and I know you would have killed him with your cheating. I want to emphasize something. Here, are you listening to me? Yes, she said, I'm listening. Don't ever let this guy between me and my girls, or your father will know everything about you, all the raw details, as you rightly put it. I told her, don't think I'm kidding. I've trusted you for most of my adult life. I didn't know it was possible, but you broke that trust. I'm repeating myself, but I have to fight myself not to just shoot you on sight. I have a lot of hate in my heart for you, and that's what defines me at this moment. Do you get it? Yes, she finally said between sobs. Mark, she sobbed, I'm so sorry, I never wanted this. Neither did I said, and hung up. 6 months later, I received the official papers that defined the official end of my marriage. I had recovered from my bout of depression, But there was still something missing in my life. I couldn't figure out what it was. I dated a few women, but I didn't get very far. I guess they recognized that I had a lot of baggage. I had a one-night stand with a work acquaintance divorced like me. Sex seemed empty without love and affection. We were just two adults desperate for relief. But it left me with a sense of loneliness worse than before coming home from work. One evening, an epiphany finally came over me. After moving into my new apartment, we'd sold the house to split the proceeds. I said hello to a new friend who had shown up 2 weeks ago. "Hi, Jack," I said, peeking out the door. I was going back to the days when I was a bachelor, giving names to the dusty clumps gathering everywhere in my house, mostly behind doors and under the bed. Jack stood by the front door while Roger and Bugs lived under the bed. I was almost ready to pick up the vacuum cleaner in the closet, embarrassed by the thought that Muller would never leave his apartment in such a state the next day. I ripped the corner of the condom wrapper off and left it on the floor by the bed. I pulled the blanket up, jumped around a little in the middle of the bed to disturb the sheets, and put the blanket back down, almost exactly as it was. I also left the prints of 2 glasses on the coffee table, some ashes in the toilet, and a working ceiling fan. I picked up another porcelain trinket, broke it, and threw it in the trash. I grabbed a rare bottle of wine off the shelf, picked the one with more dust on it, opened it, poured it down the drain, and left the empty one in the trash. That was my grand finale. That evening, my phone rang. It was my youngest. "Tess, Daddy. Daddy, you have to do something." She yelled, "Anything for you." "Honey," I said. "Help, Mommy," she said, barely holding back her sobs. "She's at the police station. This guy hit her and she called the police. She has nowhere to go. She doesn't want to go back there anymore. He's gotten pretty violent lately," and she said, "Hang in there, honey." I interrupted her. "I'm not the man to help your mother. I hate her to the core. And I have to admit that I really like what's happening to her. Not the beating, but the complete fiasco with her boy toy. What's going on around Daddy?" pleaded Tess. "She's my mom and she needs help." Okay, it's only because you're asking," I said. "Don't expect me to do anything more than just pick her up and drive her." "Thanks, Dad." A few minutes later, I was at the police station. She was still being questioned, so I had to wait a little while, but I sent her a note saying I was waiting for her. I have to admit, an hour later, I felt terrible when I saw Martha with a black eye on her left eye. She cried when she saw me walking toward me with open arms. I fought myself, but managed to reach out my arms to keep her at arm's length. "Hey, I'm here because my daughter asked me to come." I said, "Don't ever think we're going to be friends. I'll give you a ride wherever you want to go." That's all. I walked out of the police station without looking back to see if she was following me. Her sobs were the only sign that she was near. Once in the car, I asked, "Where do you want to go home?" She replied. Without saying a word, I drove to my destination. Martha reacted only when I turned onto Mueller Street and parked in front of the house. "I don't want to go there," she said, holding back tears. "Look, Muller's in jail right now. That leaves you plenty of time to gather your things and leave." She stared at me for a few seconds, then got out of the car and headed for the apartment. Soon, she started taking out trash bags with her clothes in them. She didn't take much when she left me, so she finished quickly. Once she was done, we left. After a few minutes, she asked where we were going. I could hear the fear in her voice. "We going to your father's house. I told her you said you wanted to go home. You don't have another home." We drove in silence for a few more minutes. "Her father lives far away in the suburbs. I didn't get a chance to apologize to you," Martha said, breaking the silence. "I'm sorry for what I did. I was stupid, and you caught me cheating. I accept that. But I never stopped loving you. I just forgot what that meant for a while. I didn't even want to live with Steve. We didn't have much in common. I want to tell you that I'm sorry for hurting you." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Could I have said it's okay? Absolutely not. Could I tell her I forgive her? That would be a lie, since I still resented the way she had ruined our marriage. I was silent. I think my silence hurt her more than any pompous speech I could have made to let her know how much she had hurt me. I still couldn't understand how you could swear your love to a man and then hurt him so seriously near her father's house. Martha looked at me. "What am I going to tell my father?" She asked. It rendered me speechless. We'd been divorced for months and she hadn't told her father. "You've got to be kidding me." I said. "Harvey doesn't know we're divorced." "Well, I just told him we were in trouble," Martha said. "You definite in trouble now?" I replied, "Find a good reason, but don't make me the bad guy or I'll hear about it and tell him the truth. It was late." But I didn't offer to help Martha move her things into her father's house. First of all, I was enjoying her misery a little second. I didn't want to talk to Harvey the next day. I parked across the street from Muller's house. He got home just before noon. It was time to put the final nail in the coffin of their flirtation. I grabbed the cheapest bottle of Chilean wine I'd bought along the way, a $1.10 investment, and headed up the stairs. Miller opened the door and was surprised to recognize me. "Hi." I said we've never met, but I'm Frank McKay, Martha Sharp's ex-husband. I offered him a bottle of wine and he took it. "Here, take it, so you know I'm not a freeloader." "This will replace the other bottle of wine I emptied," I said. Then I stuck my hand in my pocket and pulled out a key, the key to his apartment. I gave it to him. "Oh, and I won't be needing this either." Martha moved out last night. I smiled all the way to my car. I was in high spirits, knowing that Muller would be more sorry for the loss of his $900 bottle of Chateau Montelena than for the loss of Martha. I had a springy step. Revenge can be so sweet. I guess I can move on now after burning that